All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Kimberly Dawn, and I am a Class 1 flight instructor in Canada. And you are either a flight instructor or a flight training student, or you are one of those two people, and they need to see this video. This video is about how to, when learning or teaching how to fly small airplanes, in the beginning, the primary exercises, how to master the trim properly and quickly to prevent bad habits down the road. Now, I'm just going to assume that if you're a flight instructor or a flight training student, you know what the trim is, so I don't have to explain that to you. But it's one of those things that of the top 10 most common offenders in exercises done poorly or taught poorly, trim isn't really its own exercise. It's a supplement or it's a staple in many other exercises. So when trim is done poorly, it affects all of those other exercises. And when trimming is done well, it improves all of those other exercises. So it's one of your foundations. Trimming can be mastered in, I've come up with 4 steps. I've never read this anywhere. I actually created this 4-step simple process for one of my students, and I started using it with all of my students, just like the 4-step crosswind and the 4-step flap exercises and the 4-step forced landing and the 4-step aim point exercises. I'm sensing a theme here. Okay, let's get into it. How to master the trim in 4 steps. When you're talking about trim, I've got visual references on my phone. So when you're talking about trim, okay, the first thing, step number 1, is you always have to talk about visual references to outside. If you bring in instruments right now let's pretend that you're not breaking bad habits, but you are simply teaching trim or learning trim for the very first time. If you bring in instruments right now, you will set the student up for failure. And the reason is, you will set yourself up for failure, the reason is because of lag in the instrumentation. There's a 3-second lag in the altimeter, a 3-second lag in the airspeed, 2 to 3 seconds, and upwards of 9 seconds of lag in your vertical speed indicator. So if you're trying to trim the aircraft, the poor man's autopilot, via those instruments, you're going to be chasing the entire time, and you're setting yourself up or your students up for very bad habits, because attitude flying, which I'm about to describe, is one of the most poorly done exercises, even to the point where every single airline training captain that I have ever had the pleasure of having a conversation with says that there's 2 major exercises that are just done horribly that he wishes could, or they wish, could be fixed at the primary training level, which is what we're talking about, and that's attitude flying and paper map reading. No joke, situational awareness. Okay, attitude flying. You need visual references. Gone are the days where all we have to do is draw a line on a whiteboard or a smartboard or a chalkboard or whenever you learned your license, okay? We don't need that. This is X-Plane that I got on my iPhone for free, and it's the most magical ground training aid that you could possibly imagine. So here we can see the panel of the aircraft, we can see the compass, and we can see the horizon, that imaginary line where the sky meets the ground, okay? Now, when you're setting up the student for attitudes and movements, for straight and level, whatever you're trying to do, you need to reference the distance between here and here. And then step number 1 is you're going to reference this attitude and have your student tell you what they see, because a person who is sitting higher in the airplane is going to see more ground. They're going to see a bigger distance between the panel and the horizon. A person who is sitting lower is going to see less ground between the panel and the horizon. So step number 1, reference the attitude and have your student, or if you are the student, describe what you were looking at. This is ridiculously important. You can't do any of the other 3 steps until this is accomplished, okay? Could be touching the compass, could be like 4 fingers on the panel or fist, or I will bring a pack of Post-it notes into the airplane with me, and I will stick a Post-it note onto the windscreen where the horizon meets, so that my student can keep that Post-it note on the horizon and start measuring visually where it is. And just have them fly it. Just hold that visual picture. Give them something to measure that is outside of the instruments. Step number 2, you are then going to play with the power. So the instructor is going to reach over and pull the power out. Now this is going to reduce lift, and it's going to want to make the nose drop. And the student's job is to pull that control column back to hold that visual picture. Hold the Post-it note. And then you're going to reach forward and you're going to add full power for only a couple of seconds, depending on which airplane you were in, okay? And then we're going to add a bunch of lift to keep that Post-it note there. Of course, you're going to have to push forward. So the whole process is the student staring at that visual picture. And this is step number 2 when you're playing with the power, up, back, right? The whole process is the student staring at that visual picture and just burning it into their brain. And they're more pressure and back pressure and forward pressure and back pressure. And all they're doing is burning that visual picture into their brain. This is so critical. This is so key to develop those neural pathways and cement in their mind that the attitude or the picture is way more important than the instruments. Because if you introduce instruments too early, you're introducing lag too early. They don't have any understanding of this. They won't be able to attitude fly. And many students who are keen and observant will gravitate toward the instruments in the beginning because they want to get it right. And the instruments, given that they have numbers on them, allow them to measure, right? I can measure how well I'm doing. I can measure straight and level flying because I've got numbers that tell me if I'm going up or going down. Whereas if you were to focus on this visual picture, you will have measurements, okay? The Post-it note is too low, the Post-it note is too high, or however else you measure the attitude. Step number 1, have the student describe the attitude and just keep it there. Step number 2, once they prove and verbalize what they're looking at and prove that they can keep it there, then you're going to mess with it. You're going to more power, less power, more power, less power, and they're going to struggle to keep it there, okay? This is burning into their brain. The visual picture is the most important thing. Step number 3, this is assuming, of course, they understand the aerodynamics and the airflow of the trim or over the tail, which you have completed on the ground, right? Then, while they are holding that perfect visual picture, you're going to slowly, give it enough power so they're either holding full forward pressure or a lot of back pressure, whatever it is. So then you're going to slowly move the trim so that they can feel it. You move the trim, the instructor does, and the student just holds that visual picture, right? And you're going to move the trim so that they can feel the pressure release. They are doing nothing but holding that visual picture. And then they okay, oh, and then they're going to verbalize to you, it's getting lighter, it's getting lighter. Oh, I feel like I don't need to press at all. This is magical. There's no pressure. But you're going to keep going, and you're going to keep going in the opposite direction. You're like, wait a minute, oh no, it's getting harder again. So this step 3 is now burning into their brain that trim reduces pressure. And if you go too far, it'll increase pressure again in the opposite direction, okay? I'm not talking about aerodynamics in the airplane. I'm not talking about whether it goes down or whether it goes up. I'm not talking about whether the tail is going down or going up. That's groundwork. This is visual outside looking and pressure work. This is pressure work, okay? I'm going to pause there for dramatic effect. So then you're just going to use that trim to show them that trim is about pressure. And once they can prove to you that they can still hold that visual picture while you're moving the trim, and now it's just 100% burned into their brain that the visual picture is the most important thing, then after all of this, you can give them the trim. Give them. Do you have to describe that if you're pulling, you need to pull down the trim? Sure, absolutely. But what I would prefer, what is actually more effective for their own learning, is you let them play with it. If you're pulling and you pull the trim back toward you, great. And you can say that out loud. If they're pushing and you push the trim away from you, great. You can say that out loud. But it's actually more effective for their learning if you just let them play with it and figure it out while holding that visual picture. Instructors, this does mean that you need to be staring at that visual picture as well to make sure that they're keeping it there. Okay, so that's 4 steps. I'll cover it again in a second. Then you're going to be doing this process in different attitudes. This is a climb attitude. God, I love X-Plane. Get it. Just get it. It's free. So you can see the horizon kind of in my camera. You can see the horizon is down here because we're in a nose up attitude. This is a climb. You can teach the 4 steps in a climb as well. All right, here's the climb attitude. Hold the climb attitude. Great. Okay, I'm going to reduce the power a little bit. Hold that climb attitude. Okay, the power's going full. You don't really play with the power too much in climb attitude in 172 when you're learning primary training. But then you can play with the trim, right? Have them hold that climb attitude while they're counteracting the pressures that you were introducing with the trim. And of course, then let them play with the trim. Instructors, the second most important thing after, or like during the whole process, not after the process, during the process, is instructors, you have to have patience. You have to let their brain catch up to what they're feeling. And even if you have to count to 10 before you do something, like I'm going to give it trim, and then count to 10 in your head, or count to 5, but like at least 5, preferably 10 seconds, and let them figure out what the pressures are. Go on to something new, count to 10. You have to slow down. Yes, there are lots of students that can pick this up like that and apply it immediately. But primary flight training is about building habits. If they understand quickly, great. Make sure you do this exercise multiple flights in a row, 5, 6, 7 flights in a row. It doesn't have to take that long. It can take 5-10 minutes each after the first go at it, right? But it's important that you let the students build those neural pathways that take some time. So make sure you repeat it over and over again. So as a recap, as a summary, step number 1 on mastering the trim is have the student describe to you what they are looking at, because your visual picture from the right side is going to look different from their visual picture. I've flown with instructors that are shorter than me. I've flown with instructors that are taller than me. Okay, they have a different picture. Have the student describe what they're looking at and have them hold it. Okay, you have to get your own visual picture and watch what it is. Step number 2, once they can prove that they can verbalize and hold it, then you're going to play with power. More power, less power, more power, less power. And have them fight against the pressures to hold the visual picture. Is altitude important right now? No! Don't talk about the instruments. Is airspeed important right now? Don't stall. But no, it's not important right now. Holding the visual picture is important. You can do this setting up in a power off descent, right? Which in a 172 is pretty much normal cruise attitude. But then drop your levels of flaps and get the new visual picture and trim it out. Trimming is that exercise that's going to affect all of the other exercises. If your student is constantly holding pressure, they don't understand energy management of the machine. Let me say that again for effect. If your student is constantly holding either back pressure or forward pressure, they don't understand energy management of the machine. And if you argue with me, I'd say I'd like to fly with your student and see if they understand energy management of the machine. Okay, so that's step number 1 is laid out. Step number 2 is play with the power. Step number 3 is the instructor slowly moves the trim wheel from top to bottom and allows the student enough time as you're slowly moving that trim wheel, allows the student to realize it releases pressure. Oh, there's no pressure in my hand and I'm still holding the picture. And then, oh, and you keep going. You're like, oh, now there's a lot more pressure. So they've now made the solid mental connection that trim is pressure. Trim is pressure. Okay, and then step number 4, you allow the student to play with the trim and find the sweet spot and then test for hands-free. Here's how to tell if they're kind of too gung-ho or they're getting into it too much, is if they're like, I like to get my students to test hands-free. So are you trimmed? And they'll go, yep. And I'll say, okay, test it hands-free, let's go. And then they let go and the nose drops or rises, or like you count to 3 and it slowly drops, whatever it is. But here's how to tell if they're getting a little too into it. They let go and trim, let go and trim, let go and trim, okay? I tell my students that if the airplane nose or the visual picture is changing at the same time that your hand is moving the trim tab or trim wheel, you lose the privilege, because trim is a privilege, it's not a right. Trim is a privilege, it's not a right. You get the privilege of reducing the muscle pressure. Trim is not. Yes, there's lots of aerodynamics theory that you can introduce. It holds speed, it holds attitude, it holds whatever. You can get into the 2-year aerodynamics university degree if you want to, but what you're trying to train into your pilots is a mental connection between energy and airplane. Okay, so that is my my 4-step process on the trim. If you liked this advice or how I teach or my constant ramblings, then I have a YouTube channel. It's called Kimberly Dawn, and you can go find some instructor advice there. Students really like the instructor advice as well. Also, I teach like this every day in a private group called Top Instructors and Students. You can send me a private message and I'll send you some information about that. I hope this helps. Go kick some ass. Bye, guys.